Look, you've got that role as First Minister, but you're also a dad to your son Matthew.
I am.
And congratulations on the arrival of your grandson. How are you pronouncing that? Rua?
Rua.
Rua, lovely. Is it a Scottish name? I've never heard that.
It's
Sounds Portuguese.
it's essentially a derivation of a Gaelic name.
Right,
So
lovely.
it's,
But you're kind of walking that tightrope, and it would be very, I think, understandable or easy for you to be like, take the eye off the ball a wee bit with with your son and the world that he's grown up in, because you're running the country. How do you walk that sort of tightrope? What age is he? Is he 14?
14. Yeah, it's 14.
I remember being 14 and it was tough, but I think it's a hell of a lot harder now.
It's much tougher now. It's much tougher now.
There's no escape from anything.
And this worries me. It's the one it's probably the biggest factor for me in my thinking about being First Minister. I think I've got to be most careful about is about how I stay close to my son. I think that's probably my biggest challenge, that I do that. I've got 3 children. My daughter has just had a baby. I've got an older son, and I've got Matthew, who's 14 and living at home with us. And I am conscious how important it is. When I think about my relationship with my dad and my mum,
Yeah.
I think it's so important that children have a close relationship with their parents where that is possible to be the case. And it's, we just talked about the influence of my parents on me, and I am a product of my parents.
Yeah.
Just totally and utterly. So therefore I feel I've got to be really careful that I'm able to be close to my son about all that we do.
How was your dad with you? Was he like old school? Was he a bit like sort of stoic and tough? Did he show you love? Like, what was he like?
He was stoic, yeah. The love that was shown to me was a practical love of support,
yeah,
and encouragement. So that's how my dad, and he showed his love by being there.
Yeah.
By sorting things, fixing things, making things happen, making sure we had a good life. That was him demonstrating his love to us.
It's a regular fixture on this podcast is my grandpa, best mate.
Uh-huh.
So it was just me and my mum growing up, and he was like, he was always dead soft, as the word, like dead loving, and I'd be like, get off me, gimps up kissing me, but we just had such a close relationship, and I know kind of what that did for me. So,
I think the key thing, the word you used there, Sean, was close.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I need to make sure I stay close to Matthew, because I think it's much tougher, much tougher to be a young person in Scotland today than it was when I was growing up.
To bring it right, see the whole masculinity thing, I really wanted to touch on, and I want to read something that you said about Matthew in 2012. So he'd have been like 1 year old, and it really, really struck with me. So I know kind of what I got from my grandpa, and he was like a guy's guy, but with me he was always just soft, and I just always felt very loved and like, this is my best mate. And that kind of rubbed off in me, so I never felt the need to be like, oh, I'm a tough guy. Like, I'm a guy's guy as well, but I don't know, I've just never felt pressured by that. Whereas I've got pals whose dads are like old school, East End hard men, and we talk about it now, and they still feel as if they have to also keep that veneer. You said, right, and you said it on Father's Day 2012, the question you were asked was, what is the best lesson that a father can teach their child? I think this comes back to me saying everything filters down. Mm-hmm. You said love. You try to express it to their children and hope that they will express it to others. I thought that was such a nice thing to say. And especially even 13 years ago, there could have been like sniggers. Oh, that's a soft thing to say. That's the type of thing a mum would say. But I think masculinity in its truest form is doing whatever the hell you want and doing it in a positive way.
Yeah, well, like, I'm glad you've reminded me of,
It's a really lovely thing, yeah.
and in a sense, it does reflect who I am. I clearly love my children.
Yeah.
I want them to feel my love for them, and my love will be demonstrated in the support and the encouragement and the comfort I can bring them, because there'll be moments that are tough for them.
Mm.
And I think what I always felt was that I would have been able to go back home, whatever had happened, and I would have had a supportive, loving environment from my parents.
Mm.
So, if I think about, disappointments, when things didn't go right, when an exam might not have gone the right way, or if I'd, not won a competition I was in as a youngster, or we hadn't won a football match, or whatever, or that, something had happened, my parents were, I said to you, my mum was a non-judgmental person, and that's what she was like.
Mm.
She just dealt with things, and it was, and look, I suppose if she was disappointed in me, I would have felt it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in a way that was not going to be dismissive. And that's, I think, really important, that children feel they have got security and support and safety. And
Yeah.
I think that's, ideally it's delivered in a family environment, but sometimes families don't work out well, and there's got to be other forms of support that people get together. But fundamentally, if I think about how my life has panned out, it's panned out because I've had loving support from my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and loving support from those around about me.
That's it. And family networks, like mine is slightly unconventional, but it worked. And
Exactly.
I got different things from different people. And when I then hear, so I was on Radio Scotland with Stephen Jardine, and he's like, how we help their boys. And I had some suggestions of sort of observations on various things. But one of the things I think is that it's kind of like me looking out the window and seeing 100 people and thinking, what can I do for all these 100? How can I influence them? But I'm forgetting the one that's in the room with me, and it becomes like a sort of personal responsibility. And it's like, I think, like, so from my school was a mixed bag with like the types of family dynamics that people had. And one thing I can recognise now is that ones that maybe acted out, or ones that maybe behaved in ways that would be seen as sort of unpalatable, they didn't have like a secure home unit, or they didn't have a feeling of safety and security, and they sought it in sort of different ways, whether it was gang culture, violence, that type of thing. And it's like, yeah, where possible, focus on the young man or young woman that's within your home. And obviously for you, that's your son. And it's like, how do you treat them? How do you engage with them? What examples do you kind of show them? And I think, I think personal responsibility is a very important thing for, even if it's a kid that happens to be near. It might not be your son or your nephew, but if you have an opportunity to influence them in a positive way, I think you should try your best to.
Yeah, and so I agree completely with that, and that you've got to. Yeah, I'm conscious from my own upbringing, the example that my parents were to me.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure my son is able to see the same example, or he can see an example that gives him confidence and comfort. It's also interesting, I think, that we try to understand what is going on in people's lives. I saw a really interesting school performance one day when I was education secretary, and it was a drama production in a school, and there were 2 desks on the stage, and it was pupils that were performing the whole thing. So this pupil comes in as the teacher, and a pupil comes in as a pupil, and it's the encounter about where's the homework, and the homework's not been done. So there's a shouting match.
Yeah.
Why is the homework not been done? Blah, blah, blah. And it ends up in a confrontation. And they go their separate ways. And then the scene is on either end of the stage, the teacher's flat where she is with her partner, and the pupil's house where he's at home. And in the pupil's home, he's having to look after another sibling because his mother is lying on the couch, drunk.
Yeah.
And in the teacher's flat, the teacher is saying to her partner, "Oh, John Swinney's not handed his homework in again. Just it's how are we supposed to make progress? Blah blah blah." And the partner says, "Have you ever asked him what's going on at home?" "What do you mean?" "Well, what?" So it all changes. Teacher comes back in, pupil turns up, homework's not been done. "What's happening at home? Is everything okay? What's anything I can help with?" I can barely say that. I say, "Jeepers." And the mood completely changes. And there's a different relationship is then constructed about, well, how can we help? How can we work this? Coming at lunchtime, we'll do. And the child then is able to get the support.
Yeah.
Now, it just for me was an incredibly powerful, it was a 5-minute drama on a school platform.
That's amazing.
That summed up exactly what you're talking about.
It makes me think as well, and I try and do it, like, see if I hold a door open for somebody and they just walk past me, I'm very likely to shout, "Do I look like a doorman to you?" Not even a nod, not even a whatever. I'm trying my best to be like, I have no idea what's going on. Maybe they are just rude. But then is that for me to judge? Like I say, I walk as an imperfect person.
But then that's also, but I think fundamentally, human courtesy, kindness, empathy towards others. You see, there's a lot of that I felt about being in Rome at the weekend. I thought, here we're here to pay tribute to a man who's demonstrated empathy, compassion, respect and love to others. And I think we could do more of that in the world.
Did you watch, I kind of hate bringing it up because it has been used as a bit of a political football, but did you watch Adolescence? Did you see it? Huge talking point.
I've watched some of it.
Adolescence, for anyone unaware who's not seen it, Netflix, is the single shot. See, it's brilliantly done, isn't it? Starring Stephen Graham and a young boy that's in it. It's incredible. And it follows what is the murder of a young girl, and a wee boy is arrested very quickly, and it starts to transpire that he seems to have been, I don't know, like his consciousness had been infiltrated by sort of what I would describe as some modern, nefarious, sinister, disingenuous ideologies. I don't like to use his name too much, but the Andrew Tate umbrella is the type of thing that I'm talking about. And it became just a huge talking point. I mean, from what you've seen, what's your read on it? I was really creeped out by it.
I was terrified, absolutely terrified watching it. I've only managed to watch the first episode.
Terrified as a dad or as a leader of the country?
A bit of both, but probably more terrified as a dad, because when I say to you that I think it's harder growing up in Scotland today than it was when I grew up, we're in harder times, harsher times, than what I feel were the kind of gentle, supportive times that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And I was terrified watching it. And I've not completed watching it for any other reason than I'm finding it hard to go back to watch episode 2.
I really, when I got halfway through it, I was like, this is so uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable watching.
But I don't say that in any way to dismiss it, because I don't.
No, no.
I think it is a visualization of some of the issues that young people are living with now.
I think we have, I mean, who does have the answers? It's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? I feel like we are witnessing in real time, it's radicalisation. And radicalisation, the best example I could possibly give, here's another podcast for you. Aean Dean, who became a friend of mine, born in Saudi Arabia. He joined Al Qaeda and he created a chemical bomb that killed 200 people, and very quickly realised, he just woke up and was like, I have been brainwashed my entire life. And he goes to Doha, hands himself in to the authorities, joins MI6 as an undercover British spy, does a field debrief in Scotland. He lived in Livingston. I think I'm allowed to say that, and I hope I'm allowed to say that now. He's not living here anymore, under protection from like Special Branch. And he's a regular on Newsnight. He went back to the caves of Afghanistan and lived with Osama bin Laden, who took a major shine to him because he was also Saudi born. And he only stopped doing that because his cover was blown by Dick Cheney, of all people. Put his foot in it in an interview and gave away his code name. And there was a fatwa on his head, so I've done a live show with him at SWG3, various podcasts, and through all of them we explore radicalisation and de-radicalisation. And he made the point, and he's like, whatever it may be, it's all done in little increments, and it's all these sort of insidious, just under the surface, like wee things. It's never just one day you sit and you have a 1 hour lecture on someone with like a pointer and saying, these are bad, this is what you think. And it's like, it's how you sort of plant ideas, almost like the Andrew Carnegie principle of how to win friends and influence people. And it's like, plant ideas in their head, make it seem like it's theirs, and then give them feedback and tell them that's really great and that's really clever, and let them arrive at conclusions on their own. And from what I see with the material that a lot of young guys are reading, a lot of it is sort of self-help and that type of thing, but planted within that is poison. And again, the $1,000,000 question is like, how do we deal with it? And I think maybe one of the first things is realising that so a lot of it's under the surface. I would like to also talk about, again, like I keep saying, things that come from the top down, whether it's how the judiciary responds to stuff, but it's like, how do we intervene? Is it that we guys are isolated? Do they need access to or opportunity for sport and collective things? Because a great example is someone that I know really well, a very normal, intelligent, level-headed woman. When I say she has gone down the conspiracy rabbit hole in Facebook, and I'm like, oh my God, the things that I'm reading, pretty unhinged. And I'm like, how did you get to here? And it's just these bit by bit by bit.
I think there's, like, I share a lot of the worries that you've expressed there and the concerns. And I've been reading a book, The Anxious Generation, which I think is really, it's a very powerful and well-researched psychological assessment of the impact of a lot of the technologies and the interactions on social media as to what they can do to the brains of young people. And I suppose we shouldn't be surprised about this, because throughout this whole discussion and conversation, we've been discussing what's formed me, what's contributed to making me what I am, how I feel, how I react, how I behave. So all these things have been, we've heard a lot of them, the presence of my parents, my background in education, the community I came from. All these things subtly will have an incremental effect on me.
Yeah.
So it's not a big surprise that subtly, incrementally, the experiences of young people will have an effect on them today. But I think the difference is that more young people are doing that in a more isolated way. And I was very struck in a conversation I had a few weeks ago with representatives of community football trusts in Scotland about what they're all doing to reach young people, to make sure that they're an effective counterbalance to some of these sentiments, so that they are building connection. I think connection is really crucial. I think if you don't feel connected, you will feel isolated. If you feel isolated, I think that's very damaging and dangerous.
You'll find something to connect to which preys upon that feeling of isolation.
Correct.
The world's forgotten about you. It's them that's wrong. It's not you. Whereas against them.
If I take those community football trusts as an example, and I was blown away by the work that they're doing, the reach that they've got, that yes, it's about football, of course it's about football, but it's about football plus, is how I would describe it. I was full of admiration for what they're doing. And it gave me, and of course it's not just community football trusts, you'll have various other organisations and groups that are reaching young people in different ways and providing them with some of the counterbalancing influences that we're talking about.
Well, that's it. Like I grew up playing football right all the way my entire life, and I hold the accolade of never having once drank in the street, which from northeast Glasgow is actually quite a rare feat. Never once, and it's because I was just tuned into football and I had amazing role models and good, decent people with great principles and so kind and generous and so kind to me, and these were my role models. But they were also big, strong alpha males who weren't politically correct all the time, not through badness, just through, that's how they, that, you know, the type of guy I'm talking about. And what I think, and I know a lot of people have sort of echoed this sentiment, is that one of the issues that I think we face is that there are an absence of oppositions, people that are diametrically opposed to these sadistic, sinister figures that I'm referencing, that I'm talking about, that are influencing young men. Because I think every time one stands up and is able to be like, I'm a strong guy, I'm like an alpha male, but I'm absolutely against violence to women and objectifying them in that sense, and I'm anti-racist, and I don't believe that materialism is and capital gain should be like the priority for everybody. I think when those people do come, you have somebody or maybe a group of people who will say, you don't align in complete synchronicity with us from a political perspective, and then they're sort of cast out, they're criticised, they're cut down, or you used a word maybe 10, 11, 12 years ago that is not acceptable now. And I think every time somebody comes up as a viable, almost admirable example of what to be like a role model, I think too often we collectively seek to cut them down. Whereas I think the opposition, they'll get away. As we've seen, they'll say whatever. There's never any real consequence, and they continue to grow and grow and grow and say, you know, come and be like me. When in actual fact, I mean, these are not people that you want to be like.
No, but I think there's a sense, there's an awful lot of delusion peddled by these characters about, you know, who they are and what they're about, and
you know, you get people renting houses and cars and stuff, and it's not theirs.
I know exactly. It's just now. You see, the more I suppose what I suppose gives me hope is that fundamentally, I think, like, I obviously encounter a lot of young people, and most of it is, it's in the formality of being the First Minister, and I'll see lots of young people, and I listen to them, and I think about what they say to me, and I think fundamentally, I think they are strong, articulate, courteous, respectful individuals. and they've got the capacity, and it's a huge kind of requirement on our education system and our family systems to make sure that young people have got this strength to be able to see through all of that. We've got to help them to do that. But I suppose those pressures are probably, they've maybe always been around in society. You know, there would be, I can remember when I was growing up, you know, there was always the great glamorous possibility of smoking Marlboro cigarettes. And it was portrayed as the finest, greatest thing you could do.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that it kills you.
Yeah.
You know?
Aye.
So, now my generation saw through all that. Thought, I'm not smoking any cigarettes, little Marlboro cigarettes. But, you know, you couldn't have anything that was portrayed as a more glamorous image. But we acquired the knowledge to see through all that and just say, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So, we have to, I suppose, find a 21st century equivalent of a lot of that to equip young people with that resilience.
I think positive role models and not cutting them down at the knees when there's something that we personally don't entirely agree with.
You see what, you take that, you talked a moment ago, Sean, about gender-based violence. You look at that, that campaign you were involved in, Don't Be That Guy. I think when I first saw those broadcasts, I was just blown away by them. I just thought, I've never seen anything more effective at saying to men, boys, just take a minute, literally a minute. Look at this and think about how you feel having watched this. Because it's so powerfully impactful.
I enjoy being part of that campaign, and I was happy to go and I did the press rounds on like TV and radio and stuff, and spoke to any journalists that wanted to chat, and it was great. And I see that as being like those are the things that we can do in each day and in each moment and each encounter to sort of be a positive influence. What I would like to see, and by the way, this is not me having a go at you or a dig, and I realise it's a very complex thing in changing legislation, but I feel that the punishment is not always reflective of the crime when it comes to gender-based violence. And I'm firmly of the opinion that if somebody came and like absolutely battered me to within an inch of my life, by the way, there's probably a queue all the way to George Square of people would love to do that. But if somebody came and battered me within an inch of my life, they'll go to prison. I think it's very likely they'll go to prison. But when we see it constantly, and I've been humming and hawing about whether to speak about this, and I have kind of referenced it before on TV and radio. And a very close family member of mine was sort of subject to like just a horrendous ordeal, and it resulted in 300 hours of community service. And what I started thinking of was, again, things filter from the top down, and I think this is a global issue. This is not just Scotland, it's UK, it's America, it's everywhere. I would like to see us sort of setting the tone, because I know I'm being somewhat irreverent here in my analogy, but I feel that sometimes someone might look at this horrendous case and what the punishment was, and then think, oh, I only slapped my wife about a kind of wee bit here, and it's like the tone is being set. Does that make sense? Like what I'm getting at?
And that's why, look, messages around about zero tolerance really matters.
And it has to really mean zero tolerance.
And it has to mean zero tolerance. And actually, these days, more people are being pursued and prosecuted for gender-based violence acts than will have been the case in the past. And part of that is why our prisons are as full as they are, because so many more cases of gender-based violence and sexual violence are actually being pursued. Now, having said that, I've had a really interesting and insightful experience about some of these issues based on how the last couple of years have worked out for me. So I came out of office and I went on to the Criminal Justice Committee in Parliament, where we were looking at a bill which is about trying to improve the experience of victims of sexual violence in our criminal justice system. And I sat there and I listened to all this evidence. I listened to young women broadly coming to the committee to say, we have a terrible experience.
Yeah.
And lots of representatives of the legal profession and officialdom saying, oh, we handle things well, and we've learned a lot and we're taking forward a much better system now. So that's what's played out in front of me at committee. And then, as First Minister, I still, every week, I'm sitting in my constituency, the people I've represented for 28 years, I'm still sitting in village halls listening to people every week who come and see me. 2 weeks in a row, 2 young women came to see me to tell me in 21st century Scotland of their shocking experiences of the criminal justice system, where they didn't feel respected and they didn't feel that the issues that they'd raised, they'd had the courage to raise with the police, and which eventually went into the courts, were dealt with as effectively as you and I would want it to be dealt with. Now, that then that says to me, we've got work to do to get to a better place where gender-based violence is genuinely the subject of zero tolerance. Now, some of that is about what the criminal justice system does, but a lot of it is about example and role models and how you behave towards women, how we as men, and I feel this obligation. I'm a male First Minister. I am a very prominent person in Scottish society. How I behave towards women is, I think, very significant in how I go about my business, so that I demonstrate that, gender-based violence is intolerable, that I will act in a respectful and a courteous way, and that will help. I'll play my part, but I need others to do it. What you're doing is really valuable, because you're promoting these messages, Sean, and that's critical as a role model to, because you'll be a role model to people who won't find me a role model. I'll be a role model to whoever kind of thinks like me. But it's up to folk to make the judgments about that. Yeah. But we can all play our part in that.
We can play our part. I feel like everything trickles from the top down, doesn't it? And I mean, it's encouraging.
But I wouldn't define it just as the top of the country, as the pinnacle of government. I'm telling you, I'll do my bit and I'll call it out, and people will hear that from me. But there's lots and lots of other people who can help in that endeavour. Lots of other men that can help.
I suppose intervention. That's the whole point of the "don't be that guy" thing as well. It's like intervention and not getting to crisis point and then saying how do we react.
Well, that's the other point I was going to make. There's also about how we educate and support young people to avoid recreating some of the difficulties that we've had in society up until now on gender-based violence, and that's about I think measures like the "Don't Be That Guy" campaign really help in that aspect.
I mean, it kind of brings me on to the Emily test that I wanted to ask about. So the Emily, as far as I'm aware, and I really don't want to misstep in my sort of explanation of it, a young woman, Emily Druitt, very sadly took her life, and she was at Aberdeen University, and I think the issue there was she had some severe problems with an ex-partner who was found, I think this has been proven to have been like turning up at her room. I think she spoke to people at the university she was at. Apologies if I've got the university wrong. I know it was in Aberdeen. And basically nothing was done. And then I think the partner or the ex-partner turned up at her room. 5 minutes later, she takes her life. I mean, you'll be best placed to kind of talk me through the Emily test, how it works, what its value is, the role that it kind of plays within Scottish society.
Well, this is an initiative that's been taken by Emily's mum, Fiona Drury, who I've met on a number of occasions, an incredibly courageous woman, because she's obviously, she's we've talked a lot in this discussion about grief and suffering, and well, Fiona Drew is facing the grief and suffering of losing her beloved daughter, and it's just I cannot come to terms with that degree of suffering. So out of all of that loss, Fiona's developed the Emily test, which is about essentially providing safety and assurance to young women who feel unsafe and who feel at risk of gender-based violence, and to work through the university and college community where Emily was a student. And what we've worked very closely with Fiona about this campaign, and when I was the education secretary, we encouraged the university and college community to take this up, and it's been a really important part of the work that we take forward. So for this year, we're going to give the campaign £200,000 to support its work, to make sure that the Emily test can be a significant presence within our university and college community, and that it can be one of the factors that contributes to ensuring the safety and the security of girls within our society.
I'm really delighted to hear that. Like I say, it's being proactive and it's intervention.
Well, it's about essentially trying to create a culture, because it's not just so much about something that's there for young women. It's also to say to young men, watch what you're doing.
Yeah.
Think about what you're doing. And when I think back to the "Don't Be That Guy" adverts, they were bluntly pointing out behaviour amongst men and boys that might be considered to be acceptable, which is completely unacceptable. But it's actively pointing it out and saying, look, do something about this.
Yeah.
Call it out. Intervene. Act. Don't behave this way. Don't be that guy.
I think there actually is. Well, a lot of things that I see or hear of, like for friends and stuff, and it's like, I think there are some guys that genuinely just think, oh, this is normal. And that's when it comes down to that education and enlightenment and pointing out.
That's right. And then the danger that you point to about some of the so-called influencers in our society today, they will normalise that.
Yeah.
They will make these things look as if, well, this is all perfect, this is what you do, when in fact it is not what you do. And I think, I look at what we've got to do culturally as a society to make sure that's the sentiment that exists.
Positive, strong role models railing against it and being the antithesis to that badness that we don't want to see. Another thing I wanted to pick up upon, because I've filmed something kind of about this and the entire subject. So on the 16th of May last year, you spoke to Parliament about Murray Dowi. This was the young man from Dunblane who fell victim to sextortion. I've created a full podcast with a mother of a young teenager who the same thing happened. There was a very positive outcome there where he felt able to go and speak to his mum and say, like, I've been tricked to send in stuff. I'm panicked, they're asking for money. They're saying they're going to message you. That's essentially what this sextortion is. I mean, the National Crime Agency have said it is the fastest growing global crime, and very sadly in December 2023, Murray Dowi went to his bed at the age of 16 in Dunblane and did not wake up, and Police Scotland were able to establish what had happened, and that he thought he was chatting to a young girl. He was just being a young guy, and it had a catastrophic ending to it. I'm asking you this as a dad, how did you feel having to read that story, knowing what had happened at a similar age to your son, and then having to speak about it in Parliament?
It's terrifying, because I feel like I can't imagine the agony of his parents. In my role, you hear of these instances, you then get asked about them, you have to comment about them, and then I've met Mr. and Mrs. Dowi, they came to see me at St Andrew's House, and we discussed what's happened, because there's, you know, there's lots of issues in here, not least about the whole issue of sextortion.
Yeah.
But there's also about the pursuit of those who are essentially taking criminal action, you know, and then what the authorities can do about that. And often these can be crimes that have been committed from outside of Scotland, outside of the United Kingdom.
The Philippines and West Africa, the two hotspots.
So you've got to have a lot of police and cooperation with the Crown Office on these things. So all those, you've got to wrestle with all those questions, and then I'm doing that as a dad.
Yeah.
And it's those moments where you think, you see the risks, you see the dangers, you see the tragedies, and then I'm conscious that I am the father of a 14-year-old boy, and he is wrestling with these things. I don't view these things this is where I suppose being First Minister is not a separate compartment. It's not my job. It is my entire being, because everything is wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
Because you can't escape the implications of some of the things that you're dealing with as they affect those you love. And of course, as we all know, how you feel about those you love affects so much about what you do and how you act.
It's where do I even start? Because it started off, my exploration into the subject was a catfishing series, which started off slightly jovial, telling a story about saying, by the way, here's like a cautionary tale, you need to watch out. But as I kind of delved further and further and further, I got into this really murky territory, and there was a period where my pictures were being used all the time, and it very, very quickly, the joke, it wore off, because at first you're like, oh, okay, I'll try and laugh it off. People using pictures of mine and chatting to kids, and it's at this point you're like, I'm going to vomit. It was very tough to get the police to take any action as well, and I think if I'm looking at it from a completely magnanimous perspective and just being like, okay, it's that the law hadn't caught up, and the police hadn't been sort of educated on the matter. But I did the podcast, I did the one with the young mother, Debbie, and we really delved into it and explained there's adults are getting stung with this as well, because these are so sophisticated. People think that they're engaging with like a real woman on the other side of this, and then they're trading photographs, and it's very quickly used as blackmail. There's been a number of suicides in Scotland as a result of it, in conjunction with, I won't name them, but in conjunction with a very prominent TV production company, we took the idea to BBC Scotland, saying I would like to make a series in the exploration of this, and basically saying to people, here's what this is. The reason you don't know about it is no one's going to jump on Facebook and go, hi guys, let me tell you about the naked photos I sent. And what happens, it's this very prevalent thing that's happening, honestly, like an epidemic, but people are unaware, and people are getting caught out. At the BBC's, they loved the idea. They asked us to go and make a teaser taster clip, which we did. They absolutely loved it. And the whole point was to say, this is what's happening. This is how to protect your children. This is what to say to them. Tell your kids to watch this and let them protect themselves. You know, the old adage of once it's on the internet, it's there forever. Actually not true. You know, things can be wiped now, but what you're doing when you say that to a young person is you're saying, you know, that mistake you made, it's going to follow you forever. When in actual fact, it's like, laugh it off. The security advice is make a slight joke about it if you can. A wee slap in the hand.
That's quite difficult to do.
It is difficult.
That takes a lot of courage to do that. And I think, so making sure that young people are educated and aware fully of the risks that they might be encountering is fundamental to how you tackle that.
It absolutely is. And you know, we were we were ready and set to go, and then BBC Scotland decided, no, I think they just went, nah.
These things matter because these equip young people with the ability to overcome these.
I'm not doing it because I fancy a BAFTA.
Aye.
I'm doing it because I believe in it. It's why I've created these episodes. And they won the Sextortion and blackmail one. Any parent or any young person, I encourage you to listen to it because it's funny. We had a laugh. We kept the language clean because I'm aware young people will be listening to it. And it was like, look, here are all the stories and here's how it can happen and here's how to prevent that. I mean, that's just another thing that young people, this minefield that they've got to try and navigate.
Yeah. Like, that's right.
I don't envy them.
And the world is a more complex place now for them.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Oh man. So I mean, for your first year, I've heard you say this, do you really mean it? You said you want to be First Minister to way beyond 2031. Surely you fancy a couple of holidays?
Well, I do insist on taking a bit of time off during the year. I don't work all the time. We, as a family, we holiday in Tyree. It's a place that's incredibly special to us. So we
my producer Louise were having a 40-minute chat.
We were having a 40-minute chat about Tyree because we're both Tyree connections and holiday makers. So so getting some respite is important. But no, I'm here to serve others. That's a lot of what we've talked about here today. I'm obviously facing an election in a year's time. I've been First Minister for just about a year. And if I win that election, I've got a duty to serve out my whole term, which is 5 years.
Yeah.
And then fight an election, and then we'll see what comes then. So
it'll be a tough battleground.
You know who we've not talked about so far? We've not talked about my wife.
Oh, we haven't talked about your wife.
And I don't want to finish this conversation without saying something about it because
you know, I'm sometimes reluctant to delve too much. See, when it's like a public-facing person, I'm kind of sometimes reluctant to delve. I know I asked about your son, but to delve into their family.
Well, in short, I couldn't do what I do without my wife because she, as an example, we've various things planned for Saturday, and various things that were to be on sporting things that Matthew was doing, all the rest of it I was sorting out. And I said to her, and I had to phone up and say, look, I'm going to Rome for the funeral. I'm really sorry that it's going to disrupt everything and blah, blah, blah. And she said to me, don't say sorry. I knew what I was signing up for.
Can I ask?
And that sums her up.
Yeah, this is a very personal question, but can I ask what year you met?
Oh, well, I would have met Elizabeth, I don't know, probably in mid-1990s. She was a political journalist.
Yeah.
So we met as, she was a political correspondent, and I was obviously an aspiring politician.
Because in my research, I found footage in an article from 1999 of her reporting on the opening of the Scottish Parliament, and I was like, I wonder if they had met before that or if that came after.
Well, I would have met Elizabeth probably, I would think, around about the time I became an MP, I think.
All right, okay.
So that'd be about 97. I think she's probably reporting a bit before that. So about then, and then of course we got together after that.
Did she move down to London when you were working as an MP? In a nutshell, I know. I mean, I could honestly, I could keep you here for 10 hours. I won't. What was that like being in Westminster at the 97 New Labour sort of boom?
Well, in one respect, it was incredibly exciting because I'd just been elected to the House of Commons and there was a Scottish Parliament going to come because it had been promised. So I was there. I was I'm now the only member of the Scottish Parliament that voted to create the Scottish Parliament.
Oh, wow.
So I'm the only one left. So that was incredibly exciting. And of course, I had won the election, so it was just totally exciting. But on the other hand, I didn't really like Westminster.
Did you?
For all the reasons. See what you were going on about earlier on? For all those reasons.
I find it to obstruct democracy. how can democracy possibly take place for me as an observer if I can't even hear what the opposition is saying?
Yeah. And sometimes, and that's not to exonerate the Scottish Parliament, because sometimes the Scottish Parliament can be a bit like it as well.
Yeah,
but
absolutely, yeah.
I gave a promise to the presiding officer in my speech when I became First Minister that all my bad behaviour was going to come to an end, and I'm trying very, very hard to make sure that's the case.
See, the night that I was in Parliament in September 2019, and I sat there for hours, and I was in the chamber, I wasn't in the viewing gallery. I was sitting directly behind the Tories.
You'd be sitting just in that.
I was opposite the SNP. In fact, Mary Black came down and said, "What the F?" I could see her. What the F are you doing here? Because I just interviewed her on the podcast, as if, because she's like, "Eh, like what? Like why are you there?" I'm like, I've managed to like blag it in. One of my standout memories was one of the guys dressed like a beefeater or something. I don't know. I was leaning on I didn't have my phone because they took my phone off me. So I'm like leaning on these gold bars, and he came down and he said in the most aggressive and patronising way, "Will you sit up? You're disrespecting the chamber." Now, I don't know what scared them most, what I said to him or the look in my face. Because I was like, I'm watching a guy barking like a dog, and I'm the one who's disrespecting the process here. Chase yourself.
So that kind of, that's kind of not for me.
Prefer Scotland.
I'm much happier there.
Well, God, I could talk to you for ages. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much,
And wishing you all the best for the next years as well.
Thank you so much.
Top
Lovely
man.
to talk to you. Thank you.